One of the major premises of Fromm's Escape from Freedom is that human beings, like the title says, are afraid of freedom. He points to two major problems that any human being must face. They must face anxiety, right, which is really anxiety about the future. How will my future be? And then their fear of isolation, or what he calls deep moral loneliness, being really isolated from others. Well, these are two big fears, and we have to take them seriously. Well, in the 1930s, he looks at the world and he sees that there are some very different solutions being taken to escape freedom. Think about it. In the 1930s, if you're living in Spain, Italy, or Germany, right, that should make it pretty obvious, how do you solve the problem of your fear of isolation and your fear of the future? What do? You join a fascist group, right? You join Franco, you join Mussolini, you join Hitler's Nazis, and then how does that solve your problem? Well, you're not alone, right? You even have a secret handshake, a secret salute, right? You have uniforms, you have an identity, you are one of a group. That solves your fear of isolation. It also solves your fears about anxiety about the future because they will simply tell you who you are, what you will do. Fromm says that the Americans took a very different solution and they've been taking it ever since. How do Americans solve this problem? Conformity. If you act like everyone else, then you know exactly what to do with your future. If you don't like your future, it's not your fault because you did what you're supposed to do. You took the job that everyone recommended you do. How does this solve your isolation? Easy. I look and act like everybody else. I absolutely belong. Look at me. I am one of them. I chose my lifestyle, and so I have an identity. All right. Another major problem that you see in the world are two things that I see everywhere. It is this idea that I hate work and I'm tired and lazy all the time. People in the United States actually mistake this for human nature. We'll go into this. But I find this really ironic that when I say we should have a more socialist society, not overall socialism, but we need to use more of those ideas. They're working well in Northern Europe. We need to, now notice, countries in East Asia and Northern Europe, right, Central Europe, are doing well. And a lot of what they did is took our ideas. They took our ideas about balance of power and democracy. And sadly, though, they have improved them more recently. We need to steal some of their ideas now. People in my society tell me that if we had more socialism, it wouldn't work because people are too lazy and they don't like working. So if you gave everybody a basic income or guaranteed people health care, they would take advantage of it because they're all lazy. No, right? Laziness isn't normal. All right, let's let Fromm talk first. This is the fourth paragraph, page 1 of the Conformity excerpts. The alienated and profoundly unsatisfactory character of work results in two reactions. One, the ideal of complete laziness. The other, a deep-seated, though often unconscious, hostility toward work and everything and everybody connected with it. It is not difficult to recognize the widespread longing for the state of complete laziness and passivity. Our advertising appeals to it even more than to sex. Damn you! Why do you have to be so lazy? There used to be a bunch of cool sex stuff in the ads. Now it's all about laziness and prestige. We'll get back to it. Let me explain one little thing that I did. In those really busy years I've told you about before, the one good thing I do to pay back my poor wife is I would do the grocery shopping on Friday mornings. So I would go to the same grocery store at the same time and I would even pick the same checkout clerk, right? Really nice lady, started getting to know her. And because it was Friday, she would always greet me with a Fridayism, right? You know this idea, right? People are happy on Fridays, miserable on Mondays, right? They need to make changes to their life. Anyway, and she would always say, hey, we made it to another Friday. How you doing, Jeff? Oh, thank God it's Friday. Weekend's almost here, whatever she would say. And my response was always one version of, oh, I actually don't like Fridays, right? Saturdays, I just do mostly grade, but Monday through Thursday is when I teach over there at the university, and it's so great. I love it. And so there'd be some conversation like this. So she would say, thank God we made it to another Friday. I would say, I actually don't like weekends. I actually like my work week. How would she respond? Try to guess, right? So think of the different responses. What are you guessing? Maybe she said, oh, you're lucky. No, right? Maybe she said, oh, I wish I had your job. No, she would never say that. What she would say is almost impossible to guess. She would say some version of, yep, I know, but don't worry, Monday is a long way away. What? I would say, all right, every time, I love my Monday through Thursdays. I have a really fun job. And she would say, I know, jobs suck, don't they? What was happening? She didn't hear me. It is so weird for someone to give my answer that she didn't even hear it. She would go on as if I said what every other customer said, thank God for the weekend, I'm going to get drunk, or whatever they would say. And she didn't even hear my answer because it's not an acceptable answer that people give. Let's go on. So go to page 2. I am starting in the third line of page 2. Laziness, far from being normal, is a symptom of mental pathology. In fact, one of the worst forms of mental suffering is boredom, not knowing what to do with oneself and one's life. Even if man had no monetary or any other reward, he would be eager to spend his energy in some meaningful way, because he could not stand the boredom which inactivity produces. Now, pause there. Raise your hand. Sorry, we're not in a class, but raise your hand if you sew, you work on cars, you write music, you paint, right? You bake, right? You cook. You do all these sorts of things in your spare time. Maybe you build a computer, right? Work on little coding. What do? You do these things. Now, how much do you get paid to do them? For most of you, none at all. Do you hoard these things, save them for later until you can charge big prices for them? Or do you like showing others your work? And do you find the most satisfaction when you can share? Let's say you bake and you can share something you've made with others and they find satisfaction in them. Well, yeah, but you guys need to hide this because you're communists. Who would work for free? Who would share things for free? That's not human nature, you would tell me. No, just the opposite. We find satisfaction in these things. Right? This is what he's saying. When we have nothing to do, we're miserable. All right. Skip to the third paragraph on page 2. Nevertheless, there are good reasons for the widespread belief in man's innate laziness. Now notice, he's saying you have a good reason to believe it. It's completely wrong. Laziness is abnormal, but he's saying it makes sense that you think this is true. The main reason lies in the fact that alienated work is boring and unsatisfactory, that a great deal of tension and hostility is engendered, which leads to an aversion against the work one is doing and everything connected with it. As a result, we find a longing for laziness and for doing nothing, right? Do you ever see ads for vacations? They're always doing nothing. Why would I want to do that, right? I want to go surfing or go walking or hiking. Why would I want to sit around doing nothing on a vacation? Anyway, that is the ideal of many people. Thus, people feel that their laziness is the natural state of mind rather than the symptom of a pathological condition of life, the result of meaningless and alienated work. Examining the current views on work motivation, it becomes evident that they are based on the concept of alienated work, and hence that their conclusions do not apply to non-alienated, attractive work. Go to the last paragraph on page 2. This is a key point here. Most of us assume that the kind of work current in our society, namely alienated work, is the only kind there is. Hence that aversion to work is natural, hence that money and prestige and power are the only incentives for work. If we would use our imagination just a little bit, we could collect a good deal of evidence from our own lives, from observing children, from a number of situations which we can hardly fail to encounter, to convince us that we long to spend our energy on something meaningful, that we feel refreshed when we can do so, and that we are quite willing to accept rational authority if what we are doing makes sense. Now, a couple issues. One is, some of you could look at a career like mine and say, oh yeah, that would be fun, but then you would say, oh, but it doesn't pay a ton. Yeah, I just get an average salary. But notice, it's because the work is satisfying that I don't need a ton of salary. Because I don't need a fancy car or some fancy clothes or a bigger house or neater place in order to feel satisfied and accepted. Anyway, sidebar. The problem is also that we can no longer, or you can no longer, look at kids and say, yeah, look, kids aren't lazy, so laziness isn't normal. Because most of your kids are lazy. What's the idea? Now, let's take my oldest daughter. My oldest daughter, we would often worry a little bit about her because we would come into a room when she was a little kid and she'd be playing with a paperclip or something. We're like, okay, you have toys and all these things, so you're playing with a paperclip. Are you okay? She's like, oh yeah, I'm totally fine. And as we'd leave the room, we'd hear her go back into her storytelling and these things. And then we'd come back an hour later and still just the paperclip, right? Now it's different characters and playing. We're like, okay, nothing's wrong with her. She's a really cool kid. Now, how are your kids? For example, another thing. We would take, this is when we had 2 kids, we would take them to a bookstore and they would play with the train set there. And we would watch them play. And my kids would be making up all sorts of stories with the train sets. One day the train set would be a hospital, then it would be an airport, it would be all these things, and the trains would have different names, they would be different personalities. And it was great. They would just play at this thing for hours and it was fine. Then one of your kids would come over. One of your kids would play with them, and what did your kids do? They didn't just create things, they acted out scripts from TV shows and movies. They would say, no, that one's Batman, and here's what Batman says. And it would be a quote from some movie, nothing they created. And so what do you do when your kids aren't stimulated enough? What do? You turn them into you. You are on your cell phone ignoring your kids, and they're sitting there looking bored. What is your solution to this? Your solution to this is to buy them their own stupid tablet or cell phone so they can look bored and be as lazy as you are. Anyway, sorry. So, if you find a natural kid, it would show you that they're not lazy, but your kids are because you've turned them into you. So Fromm's larger point is that you think laziness is normal because you think alienated work is normal. You think that's the only jobs you can get. It is not worth it going to school for, I tell kids, I went through the 26th grade in school, and you would say, that's not worth it for that salary because my needs are met by a high salary. No, my needs are met through the work. And so then you think it's very normal for people to be lazy because that's what you see all around you. And notice that we already have a nice little word for this, a nice little phrase. It's a socially patterned defect. Everyone around you hates their job and is lazy, so it must be normal, so nothing's wrong with you because you're the same way. Anyway, all right. Now the next part of this. Now this is where we have another big concept that is very important, and this usually sticks with people. The idea of a rationalization. All right, so turn to page 4, and now I am in the second paragraph, and let's tell a couple stories about this. A great number of apparently insoluble problems disappear at once if we decide to give up the notion that the motives by which people believe themselves to be motivated are necessarily the ones which actually drive them to act, feel, and think as they do. We shall try to show how feelings and thoughts can be induced from the outside and yet be subjectively experienced as one's own, and how one's feelings and thoughts can be repressed and thus cease to be part of oneself. Well, I mean, that sounds terrifying. You're little robots. But think about this. Let me tell a story first. Fromm tells the story of when he started doing therapy. By the way, I mean, Fromm, remember how much I love this guy? He is trained in like 3 different fields, right? He was hired at the leading psychoanalytic institute in Europe. He was also a professor of sociology, did work in philosophy. I mean, the guy was so cool. Anyway, he is doing early therapy, and he's finding that people aren't getting better. Now, this is normal, right? This is how therapy works. But no, he's saying this is not how it should be. People should see improvements. And then he realized his problem, and it's going to sound absurd. He said his problem, he realized, was that he was listening to his patients too much. Not listening to them, but taking their answers seriously. When he would say, what's the problem with your marriage? Why are you dissatisfied with your life? They would give him answers, and he wouldn't realize that these were lies. He would take them seriously, and then people weren't getting better. He had to listen. He had to learn to listen to people, but realize that they were rationalizing. So he would find a student and he would say, "Why are you so worried about getting an A?" And then they would give a complete lie as an answer, like people do. "Why do you want an A so bad?" Blah, 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 right? "Why do you do this, right? Why do you work so hard? Why are you so worried?" And they would say, "I do everything for my family," right? "Well, why did you move there, right?" "Oh, this is just the kind of house that I find nice," right? "Why did you spend that much on a car? Why do you wear the clothes you do?" "Oh, this is just what I find attractive and comfortable," right? And he would soon realize this is not the real reasons they're acting. These are lies. Let me explain. So go to what he calls the hypnotic experiment. All right, here we go. And by the way, you can do this. This would repeat itself over and over if you did it with very normal people. You give one person a hypnosis. So you hypnotize them and you tell them, now these are lies. These lies aren't A's fault, so we'll call them A. We're going to hypnotize subject A and get them to believe 3 lies. 1, when you came in, you had a book, a manuscript that you brought with you. You didn't. Second lie that you believe under hypnosis, you want to read something in that manuscript, in that book, when I wake you up. And third lie, subject B over there took it. Now, they wake up. Now, at first, they give their responses to the usual lies, and those aren't their fault, right? We influenced them to believe them. We repeated this under hypnosis. But what happens next is fascinating. So first, the usual response is, "Hey, where's my book? Hey, why'd you take my book? Give it back." Now, that's not their fault. But then they say stuff like this. "Oh, I saw you looking at my book when I brought it in. And C over there told me that you wanted this book. They saw you put it in the trunk of your car before we got to class today." They make up absurd things. Why? Because they're trying to make sense of the lies that they believe. How does this work in the real world? In the real world, it's not hypnosis, it's the they. It's advertising, it's the people around you, the they, that tell you things that you then believe. You don't have to, it's not hypnosis, they're not tricking you. They just say these things, you believe them, and then you need to make sense of why you're acting on them. So let's sketch it out. We can tell the difference between being rational and having a rationalization. Yes, you will be the few people in my society that realize now that a rationalization is bad. It doesn't mean you are rational, it means you're nuts. Okay, so you will now stop using that word inappropriately. A rationalization is not being rational, it's just the opposite. All right, so look at it. If you are rational, your thoughts and actions go through a 3-step process. Step 1, you gather experience and evidence. Step 1, right? You pay attention to the world, maybe you read, do some research, you learn things. Step 2, you form a belief based on what you know, what you've experienced, and what you've learned. Notice, you form a belief, and your belief has as much confidence as you have good experience and research. Notice, if you only heard something, you're not going to be confident in that belief. That would be irrational. But if you've done a lot of research, you might be fairly confident in your belief. Step 3, you act and feel on that belief with the confidence that you have, right? So for example, for quite a few years, I didn't have a car, right? I wanted my life to be more affordable, so I just got rid of a car and walked and biked everywhere. I shared my wife's car when I needed to. That's a rational thing to do if you're starting to feel like, uh-oh, this life is getting hard to afford. It was great. But then we could afford a life a little easier, and so my wife said I could get a car. What did I do? I did those 3 steps. I did a bunch of research. I found, okay, these are the things I need in a car. What did I need? Just to be able to fit my whole family in it. So I just need a little 4-door hatchback. That would be great. What did I do? I researched engines. All that mattered is that it could fit that many people, and then I needed an engine that was reliable, right? And an engine that was cost effective. I found it, I bought it, everything's great. Now, a rationalization switches this order. What happens in a rationalization? In a rationalization, step 1, you are given a belief. You are told something by society or advertising, and you believe it. Now notice, you don't have good reasons to believe it. Second step, You act and feel on the belief. This is weird. You should have no confidence in this, but you start acting and feeling on the belief. You are told, the iPhone is great. You are told, that's a great car. And then you go and buy it, and you feel certain things about it, right? You feel that it's great and I should be proud of it, but you don't have real reasons for it. Step 3, what do? You make up complete lies to justify your actions and feelings, to justify this belief that was given to you from outside yourself, and you don't have reasons to believe it. Now, most often, because the they is so talkative, you just repeat lies you are told. Now, notice, some of these lies might actually be true, but they don't give you a reason for your actions and feelings. Take the iPhone. People tell you it's cool and it's really good tech and it has the best camera ever. No, why do you need that good of a camera? Are you filming your next movie on it? No, but you're told that this is a reason to buy it. You act on it, you feel proud of your goofy iPhone, right? And then you tell people these same lies that everybody says about it. Now, don't get me wrong. An iPhone is really good tech. But it's really good tech that you don't need. You shouldn't be paying that much for stuff you don't need. So why do you really buy it? Prestige. You buy it for acceptance, right? You don't really buy it because of the tech, but you tell yourself you bought it because of the tech, or you bought it because you're an Apple person. What the hell is that? That is such a rationalization. It's a joke. All right. So go to the third to last paragraph on page 4. What does the hypnotic experiment prove? It proves that we can have thoughts, feelings, wishes, and even sensual sensations, which we subjectively feel to be ours. And yet that, although we experience these thoughts and feelings, they have been put into us from the outside, are basically alien and are not what we think, feel, and so on. Let's give a nice little, one more story about this. So, I have been to France twice in my life. Once when I was young to do a surfing trip, and then my wife and I went there for our 20th anniversary. Now, if you're going to France, especially Paris, what do? You go see the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, and you go to the Eiffel Tower. Now, these are fun rationalizations. Now, these are ones that you can just laugh because other people do them, and then you can avoid feeling stupid about the phone you bought. We'll laugh at other people now. People go to the Louvre Museum and they stare at the Mona Lisa. And what do they say about it? Oh, look at her eyes. They seem to follow you. And look at how the background fades, right? And they say all these things and they stare at this tiny little painting. It's like this big, right? This tiny little painting for a long time and say these stupid things that everybody says about them. What are they doing? Rationalizing. They feel good about what they're doing and they'll tell other people about it. That's the real point. It's not to enjoy the experience. It's to have the experience you're supposed to have and say the things that people tell you. And then they go and they take a picture of themselves in front of what? The Eiffel Tower. And then they say, oh, look how beautiful, look how romantic. It's ugly. Yeah, no. Go up in the Eiffel Tower and look around. It's really high. Go up there at night. Oh, it's beautiful. All the lights of the city. But don't take a picture in front of it. It's hideous. But why do you think it's pretty? Because you're told it's pretty and you go out of your way to have this experience because it's a rationalization. People told you to have this experience. They told you what to say and feel, and you do it like a little robot. Jeff, stop talking and just let Fromm say it. I hope you are okay with this reading being a lot longer than most of the things we read, but Fromm is such a good writer that I think a lot of you like this. Please send me a message if you really like Fromm so that I can send you baked goods for loving my secret crush. Okay, sorry. Second to last paragraph, page 5. What holds true of thinking and feeling holds also true of willing. Most people are convinced that as long as they are not overtly forced to do something by an outside force, power, their decisions are theirs, and that if they want something, it is they who want it. But this is one of the great illusions we have about ourselves. What do you say about the clothes you buy? This is just what I find attractive. This is just what I like. No, you don't, right? That's not how it works. We very rarely realize that just because we're not forced to do it, that it's our thing and that we freely choose it, right? It's a rationalization. Last 5 lines of page 5. All our energy is spent for the purpose of getting what we want, and most people never question the premise of this activity, that they know their true wants. They do not want to stop to think about whether the aims they are pursuing are something they themselves want. In school, they want to have good marks. As adults, they want to be more and more successful, to make more money, to have more prestige, to buy a better car, to go to places, and so on. Yet when they do stop to think in the midst of all this frantic activity, this question may come to their minds. If I do get this new job, if I get this better car, if I can take this trip, what then? What is the use of it all? Is it really I who wants all of this? Am I not running after some goal which is supposed to make me happy and which eludes me as soon as I have reached it? These questions, when they arise, are frightening, for they question the very basis on which man's whole activity is built, his knowledge of what he wants. People tend, therefore, to get rid as soon as possible of these disturbing thoughts. And what's a really good thing for this? A phone. You're starting to think about what you want to do with your life. Oh no, I hate that thought. Let me check my Instagram page some more. I was starting to reflect upon my life. That's what it's for. Go to the next paragraph. Second paragraph, page 6. Yet all this bespeaks a dim realization of the truth that modern man lives under the illusion that he knows what he wants while he actually wants what he is supposed to want. What are you supposed to want? The things that make rich, bald, white guys even richer by buying things that they have stock in so that they can live their glorious lives that they put online and that you imitate but don't really have. Ooh, gosh. All right. Now, let's try another thing. Let's look at what Fromm is saying about how we interact with the things we have and buy. This is now page 7, middle paragraph on page 7, and I'll start in the middle of that paragraph that begins modern society. You, act under the illusion that his actions benefit his self-interest, though he actually serves everything else but the interest of his real self. Everything is important to him except his life and the art of living. He is for everything except for himself. People work in order to make money. They make money in order to do enjoyable things with it. The work is the means, the enjoyment the end. But what happens actually? People work in order to make more money. They use this money in order to make still more money, and the end, the enjoyment of life, is lost sight of. Now, pause. That was actually my dad. My dad worked and worked. He worked incredibly hard, and he said he was doing it for his family. Now, it is very true that he was sacrificing his happiness in order to make a lot of money to support his family. But what did he actually do? Made more and more money, worked and worked and worked, and actually saved all of this money and just kept acquiring more of it. It turned out, I didn't realize this until I was in my mid-20s, that he had millions of dollars, where we were living a fine middle-class life, but we were always told that we were struggling. We would only go to restaurants if we had coupons because we have to make more and more money. Let's talk more about that in a second. Read one more passage. So now the next paragraph. In capitalism, economic activity, success, material gains become ends in themselves. It becomes man's fate to contribute to the growth of the economic system, to amass capital, not for purposes of his own happiness or salvation, but as an end in itself. Man became a cog in the vast economic machine. An important one if he had much capital, an insignificant one if he had none, but always a cog to serve a purpose outside himself. Let me make this a little challenge. Let's see which of you is more crazy, my dad or you. So let's tell a story. So when my grandpa Francisco, this was one of the last conversations we had before he died. He had a good death. He was a happy man. He was a farmer. He had a good life. Near the end of his life, though, he pulled me aside And he said this. It was so cute. He said, Jeff, your dad is a really good man, but he's crazy. Like, okay, right? So neat. He said, when he got his career job, right? So when he got the job that he kept for the whole of his life, he was so proud of it. He went and bought his first really good car. And I could tell how proud he was that he bought his first real good car, and he took me for a ride in it, and we went and were driving in the freeway in East San Diego. Now, Jeff, as you know, it gets really hot in East San Diego, so as it got hotter, I opened that little triangle window that the old cars had, and you could move the window and blow the wind right into your face. It was great. But when your dad saw me open that little triangle window, he pulled over on the freeway and told me to get out of his car. Here's what he said, Jeff. He said, I was never going to open that window. You have just warped the rubber ceiling there, and now that will affect the resale value of that car. That rubber will never fit. That insulation will never be perfect again. How dare you open that window? So, of course, what's the message? Well, the message was my dad saw his car as what? As an investment, right? Not as something to use to get from place to place and windows being used to cool yourself when it's hot. He saw this thing as something to invest in, and he was trying to keep its value as much as possible. Now, of course, cars are terrible investments, right? They don't make money, they lose money, but he was trying to preserve as much of his capital as he could in this car. That's crazy. Now, of course, when you go shopping with my dad, where do you park? On the other side of the parking lot so no one can hurt your car. It's so funny. We would go to places that were fairly close to our house, and you're an American, you drive, you don't walk or ride your bike like I would, right? What do? He would park really far away, and then he would always do this. He would jog in, right, to save time. You always got to save time and money. And I would tell my dad, Dad, we could have walked there from the home, right? Gotten some exercise. Why are we taking a car if you're just going to park this far away? Now, of course, what is he doing? Protecting the investment in his car. And you would say, that's nuts. He's not even getting the full use of the thing because he's trying to protect its value. Well, who is more crazy, him or you? Let's read what Fromm says about you. Go to the 4th paragraph on page 10. But beyond the method of acquisition, how do we use things once we have acquired them? With regard to many things, there is not even the pretense of use. We acquire them to have them. We are satisfied with useless possession. The expensive dining set or crystal vase, which we never use for fear that they might break, the mansion with many unused rooms, the unnecessary cars and servants, like the ugly bric-a-brac of the lower middle-class family, are so many examples of pleasure in possession instead of in use. However, this satisfaction in possession per se was more prominent in the 19th century. Today, most of the satisfaction is derived from possession of things to be used rather than of things to be kept. This does not alter the fact, however, that even in the pleasure of things to be used, the satisfaction of prestige is a paramount factor. The car, the refrigerator, the television set, the cell phone, the tablet, right, the computer, are for real, but also for conspicuous use. They confer status on the owner. Consuming is essentially the satisfaction of artificially stimulated fantasies, a fantasy performance alienated from our concrete real selves. Our way of consumption necessarily results in the fact that we are never satisfied, since it is not our real concrete person which consumes a real and concrete thing. We thus developed an ever-increasing need for more things for more consumption. Do you exhaust your cell phone's use before you buy another one? No. You don't use this thing until it dies. Now, of course, if you're loyal to Apple, they make sure your phone, right, gets slower over time. I do not know why you're loyal to that evil company. But anyway, oh, by the way, what am I filming these videos on? An old iPhone that my son no longer needed, right? My son had this old iPhone. He bought a new one because that's what you have to do. Oh, my old one doesn't have a good enough phone. I'm filming this on some old iPhone that nobody needed anymore, just a piece of trash. This stuff is way too good for you, right? You don't need it. You spend way too much on tech that you don't need. But what's the point? You don't use it, right? It's to make you appear rich and successful. The thing is about prestige, not about its actual use, right? Are you bummed when the screen cracks? Kind of, but it's just an excuse to get another one. Because what is the point? To have the newest iPhone to show everyone else that, look, I'm richer than I really am. Yeah, my family can barely afford this. I can barely afford it, but it's worth it because now I fit in with the rest of the people who are trying to what? Make rich, bald, white guys even richer. I mean, show off that they're rich too. Anyway. Lastly, how do we view ourselves, right? So now go to the third paragraph, the last page, page 11. What is the relationship of man toward himself? I've described elsewhere the relationship as marketing orientation. In this orientation, man experiences himself as a thing to be employed successfully on the market. Skip 6 lines. Human qualities like friendliness, courtesy, kindness are transformed into commodities, into assets of the personality package, conducive to a higher price on the personality market. If the individual fails in a profitable investment of himself, he feels that he is a failure. If he succeeds, he is a success. Clearly, his sense of his own value always depends on factors extraneous to himself, on the fickle judgment of the market, which decides about his value as it decides about the value of commodities. Notice, right? He is not talking about how you are sold products and tricked into buying them. He is saying how you view yourself as a product and you want people to purchase you. Now, yes, you are prostitutes, but he's talking about this as a metaphor. Why do you go to the gym? Why do you want a certain body? Why do you want to look good in your clothes? Why do you want that car? You're marketing yourself so that you can feel good about yourself as a product, as if you have packaging and you're on a shelf desperate for people to buy you. And if it's not sellable, then you don't feel good about yourself. Why do you want degrees, right? In order to feel good about yourself because, well, I would purchase me now, look at me. And you're constantly looking at a mirror, putting yourself on social media in order to get purchased, right? So take an example. Here is a 18-year-old girl, and let me tell you her key traits. She is very kind and sensitive. She's a great friend. She reads a ton. She's brilliant. Now, right now, if you look at those traits, you would say, what a neat person. These are about the greatest traits I can imagine a person having. Kind and sensitive, good friend, smart, right, reader, all of these things you would say, wow, that is a great person. Yes, she is. But let me tell you some very trivial things about her. What else? Well, she's overweight, she has bad hair, and she has a lot of acne. How does she feel about herself? She feels terrible about herself because of jerks like you. She feels that she is not important and no one will ever love her and what's the point of life? And so she's suicidal and depressed all the time. Why? Because people like you value the wrong stupid things. And then maybe she kills herself. That's on you. Yay, look at you, the they have killed another one by telling her that she's not good enough because she doesn't have traits that people want to buy. Sorry, was that depressing enough? All right, thanks.